Impact Wrestling Knockouts World Champion Mickie James appears at the Royal Rumble, enters the Royal Rumble match with the Knockouts Championship and to her hardcore country theme. All this and more in today's Impact Wrestling news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. So, isn't a ton of Impact Wrestling news to talk about today, but I had to talk about Mickie James and that big moment of her entering the Royal Rumble match last night in St. Louis for WWE. And of course, look, she was never going to win the match. Mickie James was never ever going to win the Women's Royal Rumble match, but it felt like a big moment. It felt like a big deal because Impact Wrestling's Knockouts World Champion Mickie James made history at the WWE Royal Rumble on Saturday night as she became the first ever Impact Wrestling contracted wrestler to compete inside of a WWE ring. Now, after being announced for the match a few weeks back and acknowledged on TV as being an Impact champion, James entered the 30-woman Royal Rumble match at entrance number 20. She was the 18th elimination and was tossed out by WWE Hall of Famer Lita. James also picked up an elimination during the match, and that was Michelle McCool. Now, there was a lot of speculation when it came to if WWE was going to allow Mickie James to come out with her Knockouts Championship bout, which they did. She was also billed on screen as the Impact Women's Champion, not the Impact Knockouts Champion, but the Impact Women's Champion. This was even more significant because SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte Flair was the only WWE Champion who came out during her title in the match. 24/7 Champion Dana Brooke and Women's Tag Team Champions Carmella and Queen Zelina all left their gold in the back. Now, James spoke with Megan Morant about her return and commented on her breaking down one of the biggest ceilings in pro wrestling. This is what she had to say, quote, unbelievable. If you would have said to me that this moment would be happening right now, I would have said you're insane. And here we are. We went out there and we made history. I mean, obviously I wanted to win. I'd set my sights high because obviously the winner goes on to WrestleMania and I wanted that moment. But just to go out there as WWE family, as Mickie James, the legend, but also Mickie James, hardcore country Mickie James, something the WWE Universe has never seen, and to represent Impact as the Knockouts World Champion, I thought I did a great job. I had a heck of a showing, and I'm sorry guys I didn't win, but in my heart, the world won because we broke down one of the biggest ceilings you've ever seen, and we did it for the ladies. You know what I mean? Now, James was also asked about working with some of the people she had history with, such as Lita and others she'd never wrestled before. She mentioned how she wished Melina would have lasted longer and gave her a special shout out. Melina entered the match at number 2, but was actually the first elimination by Sasha Banks. She said, quote, there's one person I was very excited to see and I wish had stayed in the ring long enough for us to tangle up with, little Eminem. The people would have loved it. It's Miss Melina, and what an ovation she got. So I just want to put that out. I just want to put that over. I love you, girl. She also, when she wrapped up her interview, gave thanks to WWE and Impact Wrestling as well. She said, quote, but yeah, it's been an incredible night. I'm just grateful to be here and for the opportunity to make history. So thank you, WWE. Thank you, Impact. Thank you, ladies. This was awesome. This was so awesome. She says, I'm not trying not to cry today. I've promised. I've cried. Beth made me cry last night with her Instagram post, that being Beth Phoenix. I've cried back there in Gorilla. I've cried all day, but I'm tough, so I don't cry. But thanks. I'm hardcore country. I promise. Now, Impact Wrestling made several tweets to mark Mickie James's historic Making Rumble appearance. Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore said he was proud to have Mickie in the match and he wants to continue kicking doors open. He said, quote, so proud to have our very own hardcore country Mickie James represent Impact Wrestling as our Knockouts World Champion in the WWE Royal Rumble. Let's keep kicking doors open. WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley also added, quote, how freaking cool is it to have Mickie James in the Royal Rumble with her Impact Wrestling title? Now, of course, she's going to be defending her Knockouts Championship against Tasha Steelz at No Surrender on Saturday, February 19th. But it was a moment. It was a great moment, and as someone that covers Impact Wrestling a lot here for the channel, as a fan of Impact Wrestling, it felt like a big deal. Like, just, you'd have never thought that was possible. And I think when people saw that Mickie James was going to be in the Rumble match, there was a lot of discussion of, yeah, but are we just going to see WWE Mickie James? She's going to come out to her old music? Is she going to come out with the Knockouts Championship? They acknowledged her as Impact's Knockouts Champion. And you know what I think it was? I think it was WWE dipping their toe in. Let's have a feel. And she got a great reaction. I think obviously Ronda Rousey probably got the biggest pop of the match when she made her return, but Mickie James got one of the biggest pops of the match and of the night with her reaction, right? And that's to hardcore country. That's a theme that WWE, WWE fans, if you've only ever watched WWE, you'd never know about that. So I think it proves a lot of people's points that, this whole idea of, well, if it's not been done in WWE, the WWE fans won't know, all that kind of stuff. It's BS. People know pro wrestling, and it's just a massive deal for Impact Wrestling. Now, I saw some really bad takes when it came to it. I saw some people saying, oh, this did more for Impact in one night than the AEW working relationship did for Impact Wrestling, which is just total BS, to be honest with you, because the AEW Impact Wrestling working relationship gave Impact Wrestling their biggest buy rate since Anthem purchased the company in 2017 with that Rich Swann versus Kenny Omega Impact Rebellion pay-per-view last year. So I wouldn't get that one twisted, but I think it opens up possibilities for something in the future. Now, as AJ Styles said in a really great interview he did with Nick Houseman of Wrestling Inc. Over the course of the weekend, I think it's a one-way door. I don't think we're going to see any WWE stars appearing on Impact Wrestling television anytime soon, but just the shout-out itself of Mickie James representing Impact Wrestling, representing the Knockouts, representing a different company, coming out to her own music, coming out to holding an Impact Wrestling championship, that's a big deal. And I think Mickie James deserves huge credit because, frankly, not a lot of other people would have been able to do that or would have been able to be like, because WWE called Mickie James. It wasn't the other way around. Impact Wrestling wasn't calling WWE. Mickie James wasn't calling WWE. They called her. And in proxy, they called Impact Wrestling. And as we know at this point, Impact Wrestling is more than happy to work with any company. That's why they've got so many working relationships with AEW, now WWE, AAA, New Japan, the NWA, etc., etc. They're more than happy to work with all of these companies. So it remains to be seen if anything happens in the future. Of course, we didn't see any Impact Wrestling male stars appear in the Men's Rumble. It would have been maybe a bit of an improvement because the Men's Rumble was so dull and just nothing of substance really, and it could have done with a couple of extra surprises, frankly, in that one. But it is what it is. I think everyone was praising Mickie James coming out of the Rumble, and rightfully so, as they should, because Mickie James is a legend and she felt like it last night, and that is a really historic moment. Maybe it will never happen again. Maybe we will never see an Impact Wrestling contracted talent compete inside of a WWE ring. Maybe we'll never see it happen again. And if Mickie James is the only person in history to do it, then good for her. Because, again, it felt like a big deal, and I'm really glad for her. Truly, I really, really am. Some other brief news we'll touch on. Briefly, as I said, there's not a ton of stories out today when it comes to Impact Wrestling. But Impact Wrestling is now looking for applications for street team members. This might be of interest to you if you're in any of these cities. So Impact Wrestling released a press release stating that they are assigning roles for their street team, which will, quote, promote live Impact shows in select cities, including hanging posters, distributing flyers, and more. Now, it doesn't appear to be a paying gig. However, members are compensated in complimentary tickets to Impact Wrestling shows, Impact Wrestling shirts, autographs, and additional prizes. The main areas they are currently seeking representatives are New Orleans, LA, Louisville, Philadelphia, and Poughkeepsie. So that's New Orleans, Louisiana rather, Louisville, Kentucky, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Poughkeepsie, New York. So that's what they're looking for. If you are interested, you can fill out an application and send it to Ross Foreman at socials@impactwrestling.com. This is what the press release had to say, quote, Impact Wrestling is expanding its street team in multiple cities. Street team members, the minimum age is 18, will promote live Impact shows in select cities, including hanging posters, distributing flyers, and more. Street team members will receive complimentary tickets to Impact Wrestling shows, Impact shirts, autographs, and more. Street team members are needed in New Orleans, Louisville, Philadelphia, and Poughkeepsie. If you live in one of these cities and you want to join the Impact Wrestling street team, please email Ross Foreman. So I've seen some people kind of trying to mock Impact Wrestling for this, but it's very common. Like, it's very, very common. A lot of pro wrestling companies do it, certainly a lot of smaller ones. When you work the smaller markets, you have to distribute flyers. You have to, as they say, pound the pavement. And you have to hang up flyers and you have to do whatever. So, I mean, look, if you're local and you're a pro wrestling fan and you're an Impact fan and it's a way to get free tickets, why not? Why not? Because you never know what it could lead to as well. If you do a really good job, who's to say what could happen going forward? Some people want to get into pro wrestling however way they want to do it, and if this is the way to do it, Good for you. Finally, Tom Hannifan's been talking about his time in Impact Wrestling so far and discussing the differences between Impact Wrestling and WWE. Now, of course, the former Tom Phillips was let go by WWE due to the dreaded budget cuts, and it was a shock considering he was such a great announcer. And when he spoke about the differences, and he spoke about his release, he spoke about all of these sort of differences he's found so far when it comes to Impact Wrestling and WWE. This is speaking to Chris Van Vliet on an interview on his YouTube channel. He said, quote, "It was a shock and it was a surprise. It was an emotional and heartbreaking day, but this is a business. It's budget cuts, and the pandemic has hit a lot of different businesses in a lot of different ways. I kind of understood how things were going. Adnan Burke was brought in April, and then they made the move to Jimmy Smith. I saw the way that things were going, but that's just business. It took me a while to separate my personal feelings from what happened to a business standpoint." Now, as it turns out, Tom actually grew up as a fan of Impact Wrestling and said he was a fan of the Motor City Machine Gun, Samoa Joe, and the X Division. It was great research, but he did a lot on his own so he could hit the ground running. It really shows, of course, since he looks like he's having a ton of fun, and I think he's a real good announcer. I think he really is. He did mention how one thing similar, that someone's in his ears, like in WWE, but while it's been reported that Vince McMahon is in commentators' ears, it's slightly different in Impact. He said, quote, "I will get fed the occasional notes from the match producer if there's something important. My executive producer is Josh Matthews, but if you told me a few years ago, I would be like, what? It's wild. We have crossed paths, easy for me to say briefly, in WWE. I was just getting started at the time he was coming to an end, but it's wild that you keep running across the same people. It's like a quarterback going from one system to another, but with another playbook." So I think he's done a great job. I'm a big fan of Tom Hannifan. Like I said, I'm a big Mauro Ranallo fan. I think he's the best. But I think Tom Hannifan's in that conversation. There's only been a select few people that have called WrestleManias. I think it's Gorilla Monsoon, Vince McMahon, Michael Cole, Jim Ross, and Tom Hannifan, I believe, are the only guys to do it. And that's significant, and that's because he's good at what he does. He's really good at what he does. So I think it's been a welcome addition to Impact, and I'm excited to see what he's going to be doing going forward. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on today's Impact Wrestling news stories. Let me know your thoughts on Mickie James in the Royal Rumble last night. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.